All right, gnarly market changes this past week. This is NC Hammer. We talk about technical analysis here. Let's get into it. My name's Neil. Let's go. So this is a clear uptrend on Bitcoin. We did have a push out of this upward triangle, and you can see right here, this is the downward wedge, upward wedge, and it broke out, and we want to see a potential retest off of this upward trend line pushing down and then pushing up to 108,000 for the next tap. But overall, we want to see a strong support on this line right here. I'll change the color so you can see it, that orange line. That's going to be the stronger support that we don't want to break underneath. And I will show that as an example with, I believe it was Prime we were dealing with this past week. And Prime, ignore this bar, delete that. Prime was heading upwards in an uptrend. We tried to hold this trend, and we saw that once it broke below this trend line, it was a major sell-off right back down towards this upward trend line. It got support. We had an entry right around here just to make sure it had that stronger support. And you can see that little wick off right here on the 15th before it pushed back up to a little bit over $4. And that small increase from about this entry to here was roughly a 10% increase. And we got out right before it started to crash again, broke this trend line, and then crashed even further. Right now we're coming up to test this line, and we got a little bit of a rejection. However, we could see a bullish engulfing right here. If this doesn't close below this blue bar and the next bar is blue above this orange bar, it's going to be a continuation back up to 4.34. It's a little bit more sketchy with Prime, as you could also consider that this would be in head and shoulders right here. Here's the left shoulder, right shoulder, pulling out, and more or less like this. And with that, we had the push downwards, but we could see a further retracement on Prime. So I personally got out of Prime and saw XCN starting to take off. XCN is one everybody keeps looking at. It's still trying to fill out this cup and handle pattern, which is massive. We could see it push out in consolidation right here. But when you look at this in a closer view, you can see another downward wedge, which typically has the momentum to push it upwards, break this downward trend line, and get a little bit of support, and then push up again. We could expect a minimum 24% for the next first stop, and then beyond that is around 89% within the next couple of weeks. And past 89%, this is only around 4 cents, but I believe we could see 50 cents for XCN. And zooming in on a closer 15-minute time frame, you can see that it's struggling to try and hold above this darker black trend line. However, it is above the 200 EMA, and we want to see that get support and push up over this yellow line and break high over this area right here, as it had that little bit of rejection around the 2 cents. So keep XCN in mind. It is bullish. However, we do want to see that it stays within this line and the other black trend line, these two darker lines right here, as we could push all the way back down to the 1 cent if this does not hold. But keeping that in mind, we're looking back over at Bitcoin, and Bitcoin pushed out of that wedge, and we want to see that hold above the wedge as well, while this 200 EMA starts to curve upwards and get more momentum, making this water more hot. Looking at Doge, Doge has been a little bit all over the board, and you can see that, when was this? The 7th, we had that inverse head and shoulders and that major push up being around a 51% increase. However, we were watching this downward trend line, and we exited up here around the 47% increase and didn't touch it. Wanted to see some more support or resistance right here, which we got more resistance than support. Broke that upward trend line, continued to fall, and then got support off this 2 cent line, and then immediately pushed up over that downward trend line. So now we want to see this potentially come back and test this as support, as well as the 2 cent for support, before pushing up They say Dogecoin can hit $4. That's all speculation, but we will see what happens with that. We'll keep an eye out. BNT, told you guys to get in on BNT all the way down here at 36 cents. From that point of entry, we are currently up 108%. And we had a major wick off right here, which is major support for BNT. I was saying you may look at wanting to sell when it broke this blue trend line right around here. I stayed in for this next little push up, and we had that push down wick off, which is major support, and starting to push upwards again. We do want to see it break this area right here around 0.75 before start pushing up to 0.80, which would be another strong resistance or the fair value gap. However, it can blow right past that as it does have astronomical highs. I'm looking for somewhere around $1.50 before it starts getting really dramatic on this coin being at 72 cents. XYO is doing its crazy thing, broke that upward trend line, which isn't the best sign, but it is trying to hold support over the 200 EMA and stay within these two dotted red lines, the fair value gap. We could see this come up towards 0.014, and if that breaks, we could see a strong push past the 0.016 before a rejection like we saw right here back on April 23rd. So just keep that one in mind. Quant, I got out of this one the other day because it was not breaking this downward trend line, and rebought in around $91, sold around 98, 99, and we pushed back up to that area after re-entry. However, it does have some rejection. I think we could be pushing back down towards the 200 EMA. And then XRP. XRP is working on the inverse head and shoulders, and is a good idea to stack a bag for that. In between these two yellow lines is a lot of money that could potentially move this upwards, and we could see it push up towards the 3.2. And then the last few, GRT, LCX, DNT, inverse head and shoulders on this. We do want to see it hold above this trend line right here before getting a confirmation for an entry. So keep GRT in mind. LCX, still sideways movement, not really holding this upward wedge. We could see it push even further down. We mainly want to see what Bitcoin's doing. DNT. DNT is still trying to push up towards this downward trend line, but has major loss and major gain potential. Just keep this one in the back of your mind as well. And oh man, this keeps going. ABT, still not a whole bunch to look at, but 200 EMA is trying to hold some support. We could see it push back. We really want to see it break this downward trend line. However, that is a pretty major movement from this point up there. It's about a 40% increase. So keep an eye on this. If you can see it hold and get a nice bull momentum over the 200 EMA, we could see it push up towards that downward trend line. And lastly, Tornado. It broke this downward trend line right here, had that pump up, tried to push back down, but the 200 EMA gave it some support, and we see some strong support at $7.50, which is where we had the entry at right whenever it was breaking over that 200 EMA. And it is currently at 860, but has an all-time high of over 400. So with all that being said, CoinGecko or Grass gives you free airdrop tokens, reference in the link below. Same with Mexi, lowest trading fee platform, link below. And Coinbase is doing airdrop coins. That's it for today. I will see you guys on the next one.